So this is about one small decision that changed my entire life. And it's not like a big, grand, monumental thing. It was actually quite simple and quite easy. But I think sometimes the easiest things are the hardest to do. Okay. So I was 23 years old and I had just graduated university. I was living at home with my parents and my sister. And it was probably a year or two before that I had kind of started really thinking more seriously about what I wanted to do with my life. And it was around that time that I read a book called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And I know it sounds like a bit of a cliche, right? Like the story of everyone's life. Oh, I read this book and then everything changed. But it did for me, it really did. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The main reason being that he talks about something called the 40% rule. And basically, the idea is that we think we're capable of doing far less than we actually are. So if we start something that we want to do or we have to do, we set out this goal and we say, oh, okay, I'm going to do this thing. We very quickly get to a point where we want to quit. Sometimes we feel like we've reached our limit, like we're not capable or we don't know enough to keep going. And we stop ourselves from pursuing whatever that thing was. And for me, I was studying for my exams at university, but it wasn't just like an exam period thing. It was more like a day-to-day thing. I never felt like I was working hard enough, or I never felt like I was trying enough. And so that book came along at the perfect time because it made me realize that I could actually try harder and I could actually push myself further than I thought possible. Okay, let's start from the beginning. Let's rewind back to when I was in university. I went to the University of Bristol and I did a sandwich degree in business with a year in industry. So essentially, I would go to university for a year, work for a company for a year, and then go back to university for another year and graduate. And I loved university. I met some of my best friends there still to this day. I lived in halls of residence for most of my time there. And yeah, I just had the best time. But then I got to second year, and that's when I had to go and find a job for my sandwich year, my year in industry. And I applied for loads and loads of jobs, and I ended up getting an operations and strategy internship at a bank in London. And I was super excited about it because it was in London, because it was a good company, and because it seemed like I was finally like taking a step towards like figuring out to do with my life. Well, fast forward a few months into my time at the bank, and I absolutely hated it. Now, I won't dive into all the details of why I hated it, but the main reason was because I didn't feel valued. I was doing all these tasks, I was working long hours, but I felt like they weren't really teaching me anything. They weren't really helping me grow, and I was miserable. And I knew I only had a few months left until I went back to university, and I thought, do I even want to do this? Do I even want to go back to university? Because I wasn't enjoying my job, I wasn't really enjoying university either. And this is when I read Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, and it completely changed how I viewed the situation. And essentially, his message is that you can do more than you think you can. You can endure more than you think you can. You can put yourself through more than you think you can, and it doesn't have to be physical. It can apply to mental things as well. And what he says is that no one actually knows their true potential. And he even goes on to say that most people don't even come close to scratching the surface of what they're truly capable of. And reading those words really struck a chord with me because I was at a point in my life where I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I didn't know whether I wanted to finish my degree or take a gap year. And all these different thoughts were going around my head. And when I read those words, it kind of forced me to ask myself, am I giving up because I've genuinely tried my best, or am I giving up because I haven't even come close to trying my best? And that was the moment where I decided I wasn't going to give up. I was going to see my degree through. Now, I'll be honest with you, it wasn't like this huge change. Like, it wasn't like I finished my degree and then I became a millionaire or I became hugely successful. No, that didn't happen. What it did do was it made me realize that I needed to try harder and I needed to do more if I wanted to get something out of my time at university. Okay? The thing is that when we look at success, we always look at it through this lens of, it's going to be this huge thing. It's going to be this one momentous event that happens in our lives that suddenly makes everything amazing or everything changes. But the truth is that success is just one small step after another. It's just one small decision after another that leads us to where we want to be. And I think that's the lesson that I learned from reading that book. It's not about one huge thing that you do. It's about consistently making small decisions that are aligned with the outcome that you want. So for me, that small decision was continuing with my degree. I didn't have to love it. I didn't have to enjoy it. But I did have to see it through because I knew that it was going to lead me to something greater later down the line. So I continued with my degree and I ended up graduating with a 201. I went back to the same bank for my final year because I had the option to go back to the same company. I decided to continue working on my health. I started seeing a personal trainer. I started eating better. I started running again. And I just focused on like bettering myself as a person, bettering myself physically, mentally. And I applied for a bunch of jobs. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wasn't going to settle for another job like the one that I had the year before. And so I applied for a load of jobs and I ended up getting a job at a tech startup as a product analyst. And the moral of this story is that sometimes the smallest decisions can lead to the biggest changes in your life. And so it's important to make sure that you're always making the right decisions, not necessarily for instant gratification, but for the long-term vision that you have for yourself. Because sometimes the things that we decide not to do are far more important than the things that we decide to do. Sometimes it's what we decide not to do that leads us to the life that we want to live. And so I hope that this inspires you to keep going. I hope it inspires you to make the right decisions. And I hope that it gives you the belief that even when times are tough, even when you feel like you can't carry on, you can keep going because you never know what's around the corner. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. I post videos every single week about personal development, entrepreneurship, and finance. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.